Welcome to Accidental Salesforce Admins, the podcast for change makers trying to go from firefighting problem solvers to strategic, high achieving leaders. I'm Robert Sur, founder and CEO of Delegate, and today we're talking about one of the most frustrating struggles a change maker can face. When you see the problem, you know the solution, but no matter how hard you push, nothing changes. You remind, you escalate, you fight for what's right, and still resistance. So what do? You push even harder. You send more emails, more Slack reminders, more at mentions. At some point, you stop being the helpful problem solver and you start feeling like the annoying person that people dodge in the hallway. And eventually you start questioning yourself. You stop pushing as hard until weeks later when the same issue inevitably resurfaces and suddenly everyone turns to you and asks, this is an exhausting cycle of pushing for change and getting nowhere. But here's the thing. If all you do is fight, you're going to wear people down. You might win a few battles, but you'll lose the war because real change doesn't come from force. It comes from trust, momentum, and influence. To break the cycle, you have to shift from warrior to advocate. A warrior fights, but an advocate wins people over. A warrior pushes while an advocate aligns. A warrior fights alone, but an advocate builds a movement. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. So let's get into it. Let me take you back to a time in my earlier days when I was stuck in a pretty similar cycle. At this company, part of my responsibilities included managing Salesforce, but my biggest problem wasn't the actual system. What I built was immaculate, but the real problem was actually getting sales reps to actually enter in their damn data. I knew the impact this had. Bad data means bad forecasts, which equals to bad decisions. Deals were getting delayed, leadership was frustrated, and of course, I was caught in the middle. So I did what any rational person would do. I would send reminders. I dropped weekly reminders in the company wide sales channel. I sent passive aggressive emails that contained terms such as previously discussed, or per my last email. I hijacked a forecast meeting one time, and I remember coming in super hot. I lambasted the team about why a simple concept like data entry was so hard to understand. Of course, predictably, I got nothing, crickets. So I just pushed harder. I started at mentioning individual people in Slack. I started directing complaints directly to the managers. I tried to get leadership to back me up. And I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but I was even petty enough to withhold specific Salesforce enhancement requests from the field just to spite them. Still nothing. At one point, I found myself camped out at a sales rep's desk, physically watching them update a record like I was proctoring a SAT test. Because at the end of the day, I was going to do whatever it took to win, but this also drained me. And of course, reps also hated it too. I could feel the frustration in the air. The tension was obvious. The aura changed whenever I walked over to the sales side of the office. There was very little eye contact, a lot of dismissive language. The stop and chats were more chatting while continuing to walk. The vibes weren't good. I started hearing things through the grapevine. Must be nice not having to hit a number every quarter. We sales reps actually have to bring in revenue for the company. Must be nice to just say, hey, it's on the roadmap. And at that point, I was done. I was depleted. I didn't have the energy to keep pushing. I stopped sending reminders. I stopped following up. The story I was telling myself was fine. If they don't care, why should I? I withdrew too. And for a little while, it felt like relief. Until, of course, a few weeks later, the forecast was off again. Leadership was pissed because the board was pissed. Deals weren't progressing. Sales was scrambling. And guess who got pulled in? It was me. And of course, the message kind of went like this. Hey, so Rob, what are you going to do about this? Why is our data so dirty? How could you even let it get like this? And for those of you that know me, this is when I lost it. But you know what? This was a pretty important moment in my career. I couldn't keep churning and burning like this. Something had to give. So whereas before, admittedly, the temper would get the best of me, and I would have fought harder and kept pushing harder. I focused more on getting buy-in. There were terms and concepts I kept seeing out there, and my managers kept throwing my way that I knew about but didn't quite understand. things like alignment, stakeholder management, understanding your users. On the surface, I felt like I knew conceptually what these things were about, but I quickly realized that there are levels to this. I knew I had one ally in the sales team, a guy who I always talked basketball with. After a rough quarter ended, I grabbed some coffee with him. We had established somewhat of a deeper relationship than just, employee level. I genuinely felt for him after a rough quarter. I tried to create the space for him to vent about the frustrations he was having, the worries he had. Of course, I gave him some flack for his Lakers going on a pretty extensive losing streak, and he gave me some back about my Warriors. I didn't know this at the time, but I guess in hindsight, I was trying to make sure he knew I supported him in a way that made him know that I wanted him to be successful. And looking back, this was really, really critical because what that investment into that relationship, that genuine curiosity and support for him, and that being resonated back to me, it gave me the courage to ask about something that, quite frankly, I knew in my heart of hearts, I didn't really want to know the answer to. Something I've been avoiding. I straight up asked him, "Hey, what's the real reason that no one listens to me? Why doesn't anyone update their stuff?" He looked back at me and, with a honest look in his face, he sighed and said, "Look, it's not that we don't care. It's just that every month is a fire drill. Leadership wants deals, clients are pushing back, and we're just trying to survive. Data entry, that's the last thing on my mind." And that was obvious now, but it was so important for me to hear. It wasn't about their laziness. It wasn't about their apathy. It wasn't about me not being good at my job or no one caring about me as a human being. It wasn't about me at all. In hindsight, it's so clear that in that moment, it's so much harder to do that, right? And see outside of ourselves. And that was really the turning point. Because once you take a genuine curiosity into your users, your stakeholders, your teammates, you understand that they're actually what they're actually up against. You stop fighting them and start fighting for them, and they'll start to see that too. So that was definitely a catalyst. It refilled my tank, it got me going again. But, understanding the problem is just the first step. I needed a way to motivate the broader team to change. So I made data entry a team thing. I came up with a mantra that was just ridiculous enough to be approachable, but clear enough to be effective. I knew sales teams thrived off of camaraderie, competitiveness, and clear goals. So I decided to make data entry greatness a rallying cry. At the next sales meeting, I went all in on this. I turned on the lights. I had Hans Zimmer's favorites, soundtracks playing in the background. And then I started to flash, infamous, well-known Nike ad campaigns featuring Muhammad Ali, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, and motivational quotes in big bold letters started to appear alongside them, right? Champions are made in the details. Impossible is nothing. And then the last one read, greatness in data entry. The music transitioned to the theme song from The Office, and I think the last slide had like a smiling Michael Scott. There wasn't like this big thundering ovation or applause or anything. It wasn't like this was like, the greatest piece of content they've ever seen. But there was laughter. There was appreciation for the effort, and the lightness overtook some of the tense dynamic that had been there. But more importantly, there was an understanding that an olive branch had been extended, that, we're kind of in this together. And just like that, there was something, a common language, a common mantra that we could all latch onto. So going forward, whenever I'd see a rep, I'd ask them, "Hey, you been great today?" As a joke, but also as a reminder, right? That we're on the same side and we needed each other to be successful. This idea of walking by and asking if how great they're being or are they being great today, they knew exactly what I was talking about. But obviously, this isn't a one-time thing. To make something like data entry greatness last, I had to build it into our rhythms, right? So, light touch accountability, enough to keep it top of mind without being overbearing, a mix of motivation and levity because people remember what makes them laugh or brings some lightness to their day, and with simple, repeatable reinforcements. So it becomes second nature. So, when reps started slipping, instead of scolding them or getting mad like I used to, I started to send memes. I sent a GIF of, you guys might know, a disappointed Kobe Bryant shaking his head and mouthing soft, or just three simple words, data entry greatness. And then without pushing it, this hashtag of DEG for data entry greatness became a Slack thing. Reps started to use it on their own, for sure mocking, right? A little bit of facetiousness in it, but it was also a reminder for each other to do it. And that's what kept it alive. Because real change isn't about pressure, it's about rhythms of trust and accountability, it's about camaraderie, it's about the connection. Down the road, we got enough buy-in both from the field and from the top and leadership to start scoring data cleanliness at a rep level. We created a dashboard and leadership around data cleanliness. And before long, this cultural significance of this data cleanliness score kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And finally, data cleanliness actually mattered not just to me, but across the board. But it all started with one simple shift, right? Getting out of my own head, out of my own ego and emotions, and creating the capacity, the time, and the courage to understand the other humans involved outside of myself. Look, I know this might sound scary. Most of us didn't get into this job to do maybe some of the things that I just explained and outlined. But we got into this because we like to solve problems. We thrive with numbers, with logic and workflows. We love maybe operations. We love engineering. But your willingness and our willingness to lean into this discomfort, to try something that we might not be good at, that's what's going to separate you. We get so fixated on the result, right? What can go wrong? What happens if I don't execute this well? It cripples us from trying. But here's what I'm telling you, just being willing to run towards this big, scary thing instead of away from it is what will get you to where you want to be. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need all the answers. You just have to be all in on yourself because that's what's going to set you apart. You got this.